Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank Chair DeFazio for holding this hearing. As a former union member and someone who represents a predominantly working class district in Chicago, I have fought throughout the pandemic for the workers impacted by COVID-19, both from health and economic perspective. Millions of working Americans lost their jobs while many frontline workers, like transit workers, had to go through the pandemic, and some sadly died from COVID. The pandemic has had a disproportionate effect on working men and women, especially Black and Brown communities. And we must keep in mind as Congress continues to respond to the pandemic. I thank the witnesses for appearing today. Mr. Regan, you highlight in your testimony the lack of action by the Trump administration to protect workers from COVID-19 unfortunately cost some workers their lives. Thankfully, the Biden administration has implemented some common sense policies like a federal mask mandate and increased access to the vaccine, but we continue to do everything to protect workers. What additional policies should Congress consider or the Biden administration should implement that can make sure that transportation workers are protected from COVID-19?
Thank you, Congressman, for your question. One thing we've discussed a little bit already today is the Transit Worker and Pedestrian Prevention or Protection Act. That one would really help, especially bus drivers inside their workspaces to help protect them from COVID-19, especially if they're designed correctly. I think continuing to have this mask mandate in place throughout all modes of transportation would be a really welcome development. I know he doesn't seem to, the president does not seem to want to lift that anytime soon, but that is proven to be well received and I think protective for people. But what we also need, frankly, is to make sure that there's support of the employees so they're not being the mask police. I think at airports you have a situation that's set up in order to make sure that there is an existing law enforcement present, that so that it's not going to be entirely on gate agents or flight attendants. But even there we're seeing problems. So whether it's been the increased fines you see on board aircraft, whether that type of situation needs to be applied in other areas of transportation, I think these are things that the administration and Congress needs to look at.
Mr. Regan, so it took a while for Congress to implement protections against Amtrak furloughing, and you underscored it in your testimony. Its workers in assistance to Congress provided for Amtrak. This follows many worker issues we have dealt with over the years on Amtrak, including call center closures and the end of dining car service. As we look at the future, what additional protections does Congress need to consider to make sure that workers at Amtrak are protected?
Yes, I think. Thank you for that. The way that increasingly the aid that went to Amtrak, the labor protections got better and better. Whether it be, a commitment that they need to bring back furloughed employees, and then ultimately, they required them to return furloughed employees and retain services. Certainly, we should have limitations in the amount of outsourcing that Amtrak can do for their existing services. Right now, that seems to be the way that they deal with a problem they don't know how to solve, is to outsource that work to somebody else, where it usually is non-union labor, and the wages and benefits are dramatically slashed when they do that. So we should constantly be looking at ways to build up Amtrak and its workforce at the same time.
Thank you. And for Ms. Edelberg, you mentioned in your testimony that you see no compelling reason for the cancellation of unemployment insurance benefits. Can you expand on why ending unemployment benefits early caused financial hardship for so many people?
It always is an unforced error when Congress puts calendar date cutoffs into legislation when providing fiscal support to whether it's, households or businesses, and even worse, abruptly canceling benefits. So it would have been far better to tie those benefits, the expansion and extension of unemployment insurance benefits, to the state of the labor market, and in particular, the state of local labor markets. That is a concern now as we see the Delta variant surge to communities and put in peril the labor market recovery. So yes, it gives me concern that now about 5.5 million unemployed people who are actively looking for work no longer have any access to unemployment insurance benefits.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I yield back.